Hello and welcome to our interview show. In this episode, I'll be talking to John Harrison, a fellow film scholar who's done books such as Wildcat and Real Wild Cinema. This one's a compilation, actually, of a bunch of his essays. He's done essays and interviews and a whole bunch of stuff for boutique labels and film magazines over the past 20, 30, 40 odd years. We also talk about boutique labels and physical media and his favourite films because we love movies, so I hope you guys enjoy. Hello, John. Welcome to the interview show.
Thank you, Julian. Very good to be here.
Yes. In your lovely
in my
abode.
apartment. Thank you.
Very cozy, very nerd haven-y, you know?
Nerd haven, yeah. I kind of get a bit miffed sometimes when people say, "Oh, you're a hoarder." You know, to me, hoarders are people that have lots of
irrelevant stuff,
like newspapers that they can't throw out or rotting fruit. So
no,
I consider
definitely.
myself more of a collector than a hoarder.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But a nerd haven is exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's got a whole range. You've got Kiss, you've got Elvis, I was going to say Elvis, you've got Dracula, you've got Creature from Black Lagoon,
Hammer horror,
a bunch of monsters, a lot of monsters.
All the things that I grew up loving and still love to this date. But as a kid, I read a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland, which was, of course, devoted to horror cinema. And the editor of that, Forrest J. Ackerman, would always regularly post photos of his home in Hollywood, which, you know, was filled with, like, posters and memorabilia. And, I mean, he had some incredible stuff like the original Creature from the Black Lagoon suit and one of Bela Lugosi's Dracula rings. And every time I saw photos of his apartment or his house, I'd be like, that's where I want to live, you know, a place surrounded by the things you love.
Yeah, no, I've seen Rob Zombie's house tour.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
just as mental. It's.
I think, is that the one he used to live in the house where it was owned by one of the guys from that acted in Bonanza in the 60s, and he had like a couple of but he had like a lot of really good props in that, I think, like the original bear from the Addams Family living room, just some incredible stuff.
Yeah, just when you have too much money and you love films,
nice
here you go. Yeah, I just can afford everything.
Also, another noted collector, of course, is Kirk Hammett from Metallica, you know, who's a huge like horror fan, and he's got like all the original, you know, Universal one-sheet posters and things like that, you know, that, again, it's good to have money, but I remember even back in the 80s buying some like toy collector magazines and fanzines, and you'd see little ads from Kirk Hammett sort of saying, you know, he's looking for old model kits and Universal monster movie memorabilia. So, you know, he's definitely a long-term fan. He's genuine, you know. I'd be buying that stuff too, I'm sure, if I had the cash.
No, definitely. No, but now we've got our wonderful replicas and our boutique brands and all that have been made, so that's a good way to keep film.
And sometimes, with even with collectibles, you know, like, you know, common sense, you know, to me, I'd rather pay, you know, $10 for a nice reproduction and have it framed than try and shell out 10,000 US.
Yeah.
You know, it's more about the how it pleases me visually than, you know, what it's actually worth. I mean, sure, it would be nice to have an original where possible, but you know, in the case of you know, common sense and finances, you know, a replica is fine by me as well.
Yeah.
It's more about the evocation of something that you love.
Yeah. So let's talk about you. So you are a big film person. What do you do for a living?
Well, at the moment, I basically just write. I'm currently writing a book on Kiss for Bear Manor Media. When I say writing a book about Kiss, it's more about a book about their films. So it's a look at their career on film and television over the years, but also a lot of it's about the exploitation films and TV shows that they actually inspired in the 70s and 80s. So movies and TV shows that had episodes where characters were clearly inspired by Kiss, like there's episodes of The Incredible Hulk and The Love Boat that have all Kiss-like characters. So currently I'm working on that and doing a bit of work for Tony Basil, an artist and singer and choreographer in the US, for an upcoming project. And also do a lot of work just with boutique Blu-ray labels like Umbrella and Arrow, doing some video essays, audio essays and booklets for them. So yeah, that keeps me pretty busy at the moment.
Yeah. What got you into all this kind of stuff? I guess.
Well, I guess as a kid, obviously, like most kids, I was into things like, Batman and Spider-Man and cartoons and comic books growing up. I always watched movies as well as a kid, and I think my first real memory was probably when I was about 12. I came to school one day, primary school, Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Middle Park, and one of our classmates, a guy called Bradley, his father was a bigwig at Channel 7 at the time. And they had just got the rights to screen the original Planet of the Apes movies. This was just before the TV series was starting as well, so around about 75 or something, 74, 75. So we turned up to school one day and the teacher said, oh, we've got a bit of a treat today. Our school friend Bradley, through his father, has provided a treat. So we were led into this room where they set up a 16mm projector, and on the wall they screened a 16mm print of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So the second film, so that was the first film I ever saw in the Planet of the Apes sort of series, but that had a profound effect on me, just being in that room, seeing them, setting it up on the projector, and then, hearing the click of it going through, and it was really like, an introduction to the magic of filmmaking and the magic of presenting movies, and the movie itself just really fired up my imagination. Planet of the Apes became my first big cinematic obsession, I guess. Yeah, and a couple of weeks after that, I remember one of the classmates from school came to me all excited. He'd been to the local newsagents and showed me they were selling Planet of the Apes bubblegum cards and comic books. So, again, I raced down there after school and grabbed some for myself, and that really sort of triggered off the whole collecting sort of mentality in me, I think.
Yeah.
It was cool to sort of be able to watch, I guess in those days, again, you're talking about days when you couldn't just go home and grab a film from the shelf and watch it. You either saw it at the cinema when it was out, or you waited years before it showed up on TV. So buying things like the bubblegum cards and the comic books, it was a good way of, being able to experience the film again at home.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a degree, don't you, in film studies or something?
No, I did go to Swinburne, and I studied media studies for a year and psychology, but no, totally self-taught, and it was actually at Swinburne that I'd always written about films and that for school projects. It was something that I think was always inside me. Whenever we'd given an assignment at school to say, when it wasn't a specific assignment, sometimes the English teacher would just say, I want you to write, 500 words at least on anything you want.
Yeah.
When we got something like that, I'd go and write, 2,000 words on, Boris Karloff and things like that. So my teachers always say, you're obviously interested in this stuff, but never really followed it anywhere. But when I was at Swinburne, one of our media studies assignments was to write a film review and try and get it published somewhere.
Oh, okay.
So I wrote a film review for Die Hard 2, of all things, which was the film that had just started at the cinema, and I got that published in my the Swinburne newsletter, and got really good feedback on that. And my media teacher, Derek, said, you're really good at this, you should maybe focus on it. And at that point, it didn't really, until then, it hadn't really, I guess, occurred to me. I was looking at studying psychology and not really connecting with it the way I felt I should be. So once I got a taste for writing, and then I started writing a few reviews for Beat magazine, and just really all snowballed from there. Yeah,
no, that's fair. Yeah. No.
So self-taught, I guess, when you say my degree in many ways was probably as a kid during school holidays. I was allowed to set up the camp bed in the living room and be able to watch movies all night. This was back in the days when Channel 9 would show triple feature of movies every night, and then during the afternoon you have Ivan Hutchinson showing his midday movies, and they were all film lessons for me as well, especially Ivan Hutchinson. You had Bill Collins, who showed a lot of the classics, the Hollywood classic stuff, but Ivan would sort of show, a cheap disaster movie one day, a romantic comedy the next day, and then a medieval epic, and then a western. So it was like a really, overview of cinema.
Yeah.
So even though I had a specific love and gravity towards genre films, horror and science fiction, fantasy, I really had an appreciation for all sorts of films. And one thing that really helped solidify that was buying the Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film book that came out in about 1986 by Michael Weldon. And he sort of covered a lot of the films that I sort of watched, not just the horror stuff, but also the Mexican wrestling movies and the 60s beach party movies with Annette Funicello and, people like that, Frankie Avalon. And yeah, I think that helped sort of give me a good overview for cinema as well.
Yeah. No, that's a hell of a way to get started. What got you? So you went from Swinburne and publishing in their magazine. What led you into further publishing?
Once I started doing some stuff for Swinburne and Beat and local magazines, local free publications, in the early 90s I started putting together my own photocopied fanzine called Straight Jacket, which I would just basically, would have like 10 pages where I'd talk about some of my favourite genre exploitation films, and I'd usually distribute that just at local video stores and a couple of shops in the city like Minotaur and Moviola. Just put it there for people to take, and sent a few copies of it to magazines like Psychotronic, which sort of reviewed it in their magazine, and started getting like requests for it for copies from all over the world. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, basically I used that fanzine as a way to sort of send out samples of my work to other magazines as well, to see if they were interested in looking at any articles by me. And by doing that I got articles published in American magazines like Scary Monsters, Cult Movies. And then locally there was Fatal Visions, published by Michael Helms, that I started writing for. A couple of other comic book fanzines that I wrote for. And yeah, just basically, from there.
Yeah,
that was the whole, I guess at the time I was living out in Berwick, which is kind of at that time in the 90s was similar to, I guess, living out in the sticks somewhat. So there wasn't a whole lot to do. If you weren't sort of married and, settled down with a family, there wasn't a whole lot to do. So I kind of used that time just to, really sort of sit at the desk and ground out a lot of work. And that's, that's how I really sort of established it, just by a lot of hard work and a lot of rejection letters, and just keep going.
How'd you end up getting to doing stuff for boutique labels, like with your commentaries and your essays?
Well, again, with in the later 90s, I started doing my second fanzine, which was a lot more sort of complex, I guess, or a lot more in depth and thicker, called Real Wild Cinema, REEL. And when that came out, someone ticked me off that there was that actual cable TV show in America with that same title. Was hosted by Sandra Bernhard, and it was like a compilation of clips from, exploitation movies and stuff like that. And that was done by the people who ran Something Weird Video, a boutique label in America, in Seattle, that started in the sort of mid to late 80s. And I was like, oh, well, I don't want to step on anyone's toes with the same name. It was just like a coincidence thing. So I ended up sending a couple of copies of the fanzine to the Something Weird label, and said, look, I just want to make sure that, there's no problems with me using this name. I know you've got your own show. I'll change it if you want. And Lisa, who co-runs Something Weird at the time, she wrote back and said, no, that's fine. Just put a disclaimer saying you're not affiliated with the show, and that's all good. And she said at the same time, I really like your work. Would you be interested in doing some reviews for us for our catalogues? Back then it was still a printed catalogue, and also just to do some blurbs for the back of our video sleeves. And I was like, sure, that'd be great. So essentially, like every month they would send me like half a dozen VHS tapes from the US, and I'd write like a few hundred words, and they'd show up in their catalogues and on the back of their video sleeves. And then when they moved to DVD ROMs, started doing it for that as well, and then started writing for their website as well. Basically, it just went from there. Locally, I got to start when Glass Doll, unfortunately, no longer around, but they were a good local label that put out a few good discs about 10 years ago now, I guess, or 8 years ago. But they contacted me to see if I was interested in doing some booklets for a couple of their Anthony Iganane movies that they were putting out. So I did, which ones did I do? I did Dead Kids, and also The Survivor. And there was one more I was supposed to do. They were supposed to do Snapshot as well, but that unfortunately got cancelled. But they did, Umbrella did contact me and reuse the Snapshot booklet when they put it out a few years ago, finally on Blu-ray, so got some use out of that. And by doing that, Umbrella offered me a few more jobs, and obviously through my work with Cinemaniacs, and also just my work with Lee Gambin, he threw a few other offers my way, and particularly in terms of doing some audio commentaries with him for some Kino Lorber releases, which was a good learning experience and a lot of fun. Did a few Dracula movies with him as a audio commentator. Billy the Kid versus Dracula, In Search of Dracula, and Dracula's Dog, or Zoltan, Hound of Dracula.
Yeah.
So we did those three, but we also did Song of Norway, so that was like a real odd one out, you know, from Dracula to Florence Henderson in the Norway Alps, you know, singing. But and then so through them, I've also through that, you know, just once you sort of establish a bit of a name in that field, or once you have a bit of work, you know, other labels tend to, you know, pick up on it and contact you. So so since then I've done some work for Arrow as well, a fairly new label in the UK called Treasured Films have just done a great release of the film Mausoleum, the 1983 horror film, where I did a video essay on that one about Marjo Gortner, the star of the film, who was a former child evangelist, and they asked me to do that because I wrote a book about Marjo a couple of years ago, so it was a good cross-promotion for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that worked well.
And, and so coming up, I think I've got a couple of Umbrella things coming up on their releases for Tank Girl, Ransom, otherwise known as The Terrorist, not the Mel Gibson movie, but a Sean Connery 70s thriller. What else have I got? Them, and there's also, I think Viavision are doing the Wes Craven triple next month that I've written a booklet for. So, pretty busy.
Yeah, no, I'd say. You consider yourself freelance, wouldn't you? Or,
definitely freelance, Yeah,
no, it's a hell of an industry to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to take the work when it's there, because it can
definitely
come and go as well, and kind of makes it a little bit sometimes tough to pace your own work, like with my KISS book, because it's something that I've given myself, like, you know, an approximate deadline of, you know, and you're sort of meeting that deadline, but then suddenly someone will, you know, a boutique label will say, oh, you know, someone dropped out of doing a booklet or something, can you give us, you know, 10,000 words by next Monday or something? So suddenly you've got to, like, scramble to do that, but at the same time you feel, I need to take the work, because, you know, you got to grab it while it's on offer. And it's fun work as well. You know, it's not like it's a chore. You know, even if the films themselves may not be films that I'm, you know, fans of or familiar with. You know, that's part of the fun as well. Educating yourself. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
And they do some, you know, they do put terrific work into it as well, just in terms of the presentation of some of these packages, you know, and it's great to see some of the Australian labels putting so much care into it, like Umbrella do with their special editions, you know, their big box sets, and also, you know, Imprint, of course, who I haven't worked with as yet, but maybe one day.
Yeah, no, that's obviously a possibility, I guess we could look at your own individual works, because you are writing your own books and whatever on certain things. So what have you written about and published?
Well, my first book was Hip Pocket Sleaze, so actually not film related. It kind of was a little bit, but it was more about another one of my big obsessions was paperback novels as a kid, because again, you know, before video came in, you know, sometimes the only way you could see a lot of films, if, you know, you had no access to them, was by reading the film tie-ins. And also as a kid I got fascinated with a lot of the older sort of adult paperbacks that were in the, you know, the special hidden section at the back. I mean, these were books that were obviously, you know, these days they'd probably be published by Disney, but at the time they were quite tittillating. So I wrote my first book, my first full book was Hip Pocket Sleaze, and that was published about 10 years ago now by Head Press in the UK. After that I did a couple of, I did like a compendium of my Real World Cinema fanzine, so I self-published that through Amazon. I also did a little booklet called Blood on the Windscreen, which is kind of like a booklet looking at the old driver education classroom films of the 50s and 70s. So another thing that I saw as a kid at CBC St Kilda, you know, they would show what these were like short sort of 10-minute educational films that try to teach kids, you know, the hazards of unsafe driving. And there were some companies in the US, like Highway Safety Films in Ohio, who would go out and actually like photograph, you know, these gory, horrific road accidents, and they would sort of show it, you know, full-blown, uncompromising in these short films and show them to school kids as a way to sort of terrify them into driving safely, and
Yeah.
there was something really like disturbing about them, and really combined with like the grim narration and the music, and some of them would have like really bad like dinner theater level like reenactments that would lead, and then they would suddenly lead up to the actual footage of the accidents. And so yeah, I did a little booklet on that, which was pretty good. Got me interviewed for Fangoria and a couple of other magazines, and got a bit of word out. I'd like to expand it maybe one day, but yeah, I did it more like a little handbook, like they would give out to safe drivers, handbook for safe driving. So it was kind of like that.
Yeah, it works like thematically. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I did, as I mentioned before, I did Wildcat, which is my book about the films of Marjoe Gortner that came out by Bear Manor in the US. Came out just as the pandemic was sort of happening, unfortunately. So kind of like killed off any initial promotion opportunities and things like that. But that's still out there and available. And Marjoe Gortner was initially found fame as like the America's youngest child evangelist in the 40s. He was like about 5 years old and overseeing wedding ceremonies and that, and getting like a lot of fame and infamy. And then he disappeared once he outgrew his cuteness, and then re-emerged in the late 60s and early 70s as like an actor in exploitation and low-budget horror films. And I always sort of liked that duality between, from a child evangelist to an actor in low-budget exploitation horror. It's quite a career trajectory. And he did like a lot of great films as well, in particular one called When You're Coming Back, Red Ryder, which he did in 79, and he produced that one. And it's basically, he plays like a crazed Vietnam vet who holds a bunch of people like hostage in a grimy, greasy diner in New Mexico. And just a fantastic film. Definitely needs a Blu-ray release. It's one that unfortunately is not available. Umbrella put out a bare bones disc about 8 years ago now that quickly went out of print, but I think it's one of those movies because it's got like a lot of acts like The Doors on the soundtrack. That's one of those movies where the soundtrack is really and it's also one of those movies where the soundtrack's a big part of it as well. So trying to replace it with other tracks, generic tracks, wouldn't work. And that's one thing I always hate about watching a lot of these 80s action shows on Amazon and that, a lot of them, they'll take the music out and they've replaced it with like generic sort of modern guitar music, and it just doesn't sound the same, doesn't come out the same.
Yeah, no, I've seen over a lot of shows, there's like Daria and like, was it Neon Genesis and stuff, they've had to like cut out like the music for the credits or just random songs that like really capture the vibe, and it's like, here's just generic riff music, it doesn't matter. It's like, but it does.
And that's another reason for physical media, But again, unfortunately in those cases, though, sometimes it's on the DVD as well, I think that's one of the reasons the Wonder Years maybe took so long to come out as well on DVD, that series, because it had so many great sort of 60s songs on its soundtrack throughout, and, you don't want to release it without those songs on it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And you're a big collector of physical media, I see.
I am, yeah.
I'm not surrounding us as VHS to the fucking Super 8s to Blu-rays and 4Ks, I think, maybe.
No 4K. No, I do have some 4K, but I don't have a 4K player or television as yet. So yeah, I haven't quite made that leap. To be honest, I'm quite happy at the moment with Blu-ray. I'm not a perfectionist, and also a lot of the films I watch, a lot of the 60s exploitation and 70s, you don't really need to see Herschel Gordon Lewis in 4K. It's great that there's the option there for these filmmakers if you want them, and again, I have got a few 4K discs where it also came with the Blu-ray, so I brought them. And I'm sure I'll make the change eventually. I'll probably be forced to, ultimately. What I don't hate though now is sometimes they'll just release the 4K, and I've made that mistake of buying a couple of discs just without looking at it properly, thinking that'll have the Blu-ray in it as well. So I know I got Dressed to Kill by De Palma and Batman Mask of the Phantasm locally, and came home and got all excited to watch it, and I'm like, shit, there's no Blu-ray, it's just the 4K. I mean, it's my own fault for not reading it properly, but now I'm sort of obviously wary of it now.
Yeah, look, I found that surprising when it comes to like some US releases, like Kino and even Columbia have done releases where they're like, oh, it's just the 4K, but the Blu-ray is like special features. Yeah, there's no movie on it. It's special features I got one that was In the Heat of the Night, which was a Kino release, and it's a wonderful release. But the 4K is just the film,
Just
and
the
the
film,
Blu-ray is the other two films.
Right,
so it's
right,
actually
yeah.
a trilogy set, but
Yeah.
it just tells you about the one film, and the first film isn't actually on the Blu-ray disc. So it's just two other movies and special features. I'm like, that's strange, but okay, I'll take it, but it's interesting. Yeah.
It's weird when things like that. I remember buying Boogie Nights on DVD years ago and seeing no special features listed on the back, and I didn't bother watching it. I just brought it just to have the movie, but I'd already sort of seen it a few times, so I didn't sort of watch it straight away. And then, a couple of years later, when I finally sort of stuck it in to watch, suddenly all this menu comes up with all these special features, and it's like, why don't you list them on the back? That's part of the huge selling point. I was almost like not even going to buy it. Thinking, I'd like to see some docos on it as well, and whether that was just an oversight or but I think nowadays, though, obviously with the boutique labels, that's part of the big appeal is the extras and the supplementaries and the slipcases, of course. So yeah, I'm definitely supporting of physical media, and I think it's vital. But again, I'm not a completist in terms of just needing to have everything by a certain label.
Yeah.
If I'm a completist, it's in terms of, favourite filmmakers or favourite actors or favourite musicians, just wanting to, have a full copy of their works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I know that when I got a couple of, I think they were Columbia releases. Who did, like Rebel Without a Cause and...
Yeah, I think that might have been locally.
Yeah. And there was like all these like nice 4K releases that still have Blu-rays, but on the back of it, it just said like, oh, special features commentary track. And I'm like, that's very strange. But then you put on the Blu-ray, you realize it's actually just the old Blu-ray with all the special features from like the DVDs. I'm like, why don't they have that written on the back? Like I was
I know,
like,
they're talking themselves out of sales.
yeah, exactly. It was really annoying for me, but like I still bought them anyway because I'm like, I got to buy these films for myself.
Yeah.
Like, Dad has them otherwise, and it's like I'd like to have.
They
a
were the
copy
local
of them.
ones.
Yeah, all local releases.
I brought that one as well when they were on sale. I brought that one and Maltese Falcon and a couple of others. What was the other one? Cool Hand Luke.
I've got some John Wayne's as well, where it was like, I remember doing a whole unboxing, like showing them off, and I was like, I got to look into this because I was really confused, and I watched it and I added an extra clip of me just going through the menus being like, see, here's all the special features. It's all the same as the old DVDs that my dad had bought years ago, so they're still there. They just don't promote it anymore, and I'm like, that's weird. It's just like, promote what's on the 4K and not the Blu-ray, and I'm like, why?
I remember in the days of sell-through videos, that was the big special feature back then. It would say includes trailer. That was like...
I still have DVDs that say like special edition includes widescreen presentation. And I'm like, how is this not widescreen? But then I remember, because letterbox TVs and stuff, man, I'm not old enough for this stuff. But like, I still grew up on that, but it's like, it was so much phasing out by the time that I was growing up, that by the time I was a teenager, you had widescreens and that.
Yeah, it was just the...
Yeah, it was the norm.
The norm,
Yeah, but still.
Yeah, I kind of came... I was kind of like in a weird situation. I was kind of like too young to be part of that whole sort of monster kid of the sort of 60s and 70s. But I was kind of like just a teenager when home video started. So I sort of got to see that. I did have Super 8 as a kid, which you've seen some of my Super 8 collection, and that was fun, but, it was always a hassle to set up. And, you'd watch it, you'd see like maybe 10 minutes of highlights and that was it, so... And oftentimes it was black and white and silent. So seeing home video come in the 80s was definitely like an eye-opener, especially in Australia where there were so many movies that, you'd never heard of that were just being released by these small labels like, Palace Explosive, putting out, Blood-Sucking Freaks and I Spit on Your Grave and Starbase Video doing zombie flesh eaters and all this stuff. It was a great time, to be around. You didn't there was no special features and they were all bad, usually bad sort of pan and scan and cut prints, but, you just loved it.
It's just a way to experience the film.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely, it's interesting learning about, like, knowing about that kind of way that films presented back then, and then you contrast it to now. It's like, hey, who wants a really shitty $10,000 movie on 4K UHD? Oh, shot on 16mm back in the 80s. A lot of nudity, like really cheesy effects. Like, but still, it's like, hey, that's what we live in now. We have that accessibility, which is fun. But no, and you've got, there's so many things in this room. I'm going to have like a bunch of footage just showing what you've got. Because obviously you've got a lot of Creed from Black Lagoon, some Universal Monsters.
Yeah, I love
VHS.
the Universal Monsters and the model kits. Yeah, in the background, the old Aurora model kits from the 60s. Some of them are original, some are like repros, and again, it's all just part of holding on to the things you love. And
Yeah.
a tactile way. I couldn't imagine even if I downsize at some point, which I'm sure I will, a part of natural sort of life cycle. But I think I'll always have something. I'll always need to have some books and movies and that around me.
Yeah.
It's in some ways I sort of envy some people that can have everything, just on a USB stick. I envy that sort of freedom in a way, but I can, it's just not the way I'm wired though. I need, physical stuff.
Yeah.
Like people that say, oh, why buy CDs or why buy records where you can just, listen to them
download
online.
it, yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I get that, but I like,
Yeah, there's an understanding. It's like this is a way of life that we prefer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like, and like listening to record, that's part of the whole process, is getting up every 20 minutes and turning it over and, staring at the album cover and, smelling the vinyl.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely, that element.
Whereas I guess Blu-rays and that don't have that kind of tactileness to them, but they're just good to have, because again, as we've seen so many times, people that just rely on streaming, there's no guarantee that the movie's always going to be there, or that it's, never going to be uncut, and, now streaming services are even starting to like throw ads in the middle of movies, so it's definitely, and also I think with some of the boutique labels, there's definitely a sense of you're investing or supporting someone's art. I think some of the slipcases, I think some of the fights or some of the arguments or some of the obsession that some collectors have over slipcases goes a bit far. But I definitely appreciate the work that goes into some of these releases. Some of the art is fantastic, and it's always good when they offer obviously reversible cover art, because some people like the original poster, and you can have like someone's interpretation of a new piece of art on the other side. But it's good. It's hopefully they persevere. And
yeah. I know there's a lot of always constant discussion online where it's like the physical media is dying. I'm like, is it really? It's doing so goddamn well.
Yeah,
like, especially just in boutique markets. Like, I know I don't go to like JB as much anymore to buy as many Blu-rays, but I'm also like, but when I do, I can find a good handful that's like, I got, what is it, To Catch a Thief the other day, it was $10. I'm like, that's really good. It's a Blu-ray. I don't have that. No special features, but it has the old transfer, which has the better picture quality, and like the, what is it? They did a 4K version recently, which apparently has a completely different color grading. Oh, and I'm like, why? That's all right. I'm spending $10 on it instead of 45, and I don't have to import it. So I'm like, I'm happy with that. But my God, so it's a constantly moving thing. But I mean, like, you look at all these labels, and you're like, this shit's awesome. Like,
absolutely. I think, like you said, I don't think it's dying at all. It's just the market sort of shifted, and it's just becoming a lot more less mainstream and more focused now. But obviously, with all these labels coming up and doing so well, people are obviously buying their products, and
yeah, no, definitely. And obviously, there's people like you who are working on it, who are giving people the reason to buy this stuff, because it's like, oh, it might be a pretty shit film, but hey, look, it's got, like, John did an audio commentary. That'll be good. There's a video essay or some kind of written up thing. Like, I know I've gotten plenty of films from boutique labels that I've only gotten because I know people who have worked on it. I'm like, hey, that's cool. And sometimes the films are actually really good. So, like, it's also a very promising thing. Yeah.
And that's the other good thing about a lot of these boutique labels too, is that they are discovering and bringing up movies that haven't been seen before. And again, some of them are rubbish. Admittedly, some of them, as you said, I buy because of the extras, or might have a documentary on it that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you come up with like a movie that you hadn't seen before that you think, wow, this movie's really, either really good or just really crazy or really insane. Some of the Vinegar Syndrome stuff, has been like that.
Yeah, that stuff. That, like, some of it's just awful stuff, but then you look at it, it's like the best transfer I've ever seen from a movie. It's like, what is this? But no, it's great. I do love that about them, how they will just find the most random films, and
just give them the full treatment.
Exactly. It's some beautiful stuff.
I saw someone was complaining on one of the Facebook pages about the Umbrella Ransom movie coming out in a special edition, you know, collector's set, and someone's saying, why do a collector's set over a movie that, you know, most critics say is rubbish? And it's like, well, that's 90% of Vinegar Syndrome's releases, you know. It's like, why would they do, you know, these things over movies that most people consider trash? You know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And, you know, again, I appreciate, you know, the work that goes into it as much as the films themselves sometimes, you know. They're doing a good job. And I think part of that is the legacy of Something Weird Video that started in the 80s, because they were like the first ones that really sort of went around, you know, raiding these old film vaults and really, you know, thinking this stuff needs to be preserved. And I think a lot of these labels, when you talk to like the people that are behind them, you know, a lot of them will say they grew up sort of inspired by Something Weird. So it's, yeah, unfortunately Mike Rainey from Something Weird passed away about 10 years ago now. So yeah, the label's still going. Of course, they do stuff now with partnership with some other labels like AGFA, but yeah, some of the Something Weird AGFA releases are amongst my favourites. You know, their release of She Freak is fantastic. All of the Doris Wishman movies are terrific. You know,
you did a presentation last year on Batman Returns at Acme for the Cinemaniacs, which was really fun, referencing the greatest Batman film, BatPussy.
BatPussy. Speaking of Something Weird, yep, the famous BatPussy, which I've actually got 2 copies of now because they re-released it with a new audio commentary, and I was like, I've got to get it.
I've got to get it, yeah.
But yeah, an amazing film, and that was a lot of fun doing that presentation. You know, I got to sort of talk about a few things that I like to do when I do a presentation. You know, I like to try and keep it fun, which I think was in the spirit of Batman Returns, and also like to treat it seriously as well. You know, I looked at a lot of the, you know, the feminism behind the Catwoman character, and also the, you know, the horror influences of classic horror in the Penguin and the Christopher Walken character. And yeah, also it was fun, again, just, you know, paying tribute to some of the 60s and early 70s Batman rip-offs that they did, you know, like Ratfinker Boo Boo and The Wild World of Batwoman, and BatPussy, which, I mean, obviously, but, you know, it's a sort of movie that, just for people that don't know, it was made early 70s, I imagine. It hasn't been...
My release has 1970 question mark. They don't know, they just found it, they don't know who's in it, and it's just... It was such a thing that it was sold, because it was Joel from the Dead on DVD. He was the one who both sold it to me and also sold it to me. But like, yeah, he was like saying it's like, it's just they don't know what it was, where it came from. It's just they don't know who the people are. It's just a movie. It's definitely softcore porn or even hardcore porn, I think at times.
Yeah, well, it's kind of hardcore, except he can't really get it up. So that's...
it's a fun mix.
But it's basically just these 2 people just arguing and abusing each other in their bedroom for an hour, and then suddenly a woman shows up in a BatPussy outfit and joins in on the action. But to me, it's kind of like I mean, obviously any actual arousal you feel while watching it is purely coincidental, but the bickering between the 2 characters is quite remarkable. It's almost like sitting in on one of those like early 70s primal therapy sex sessions, you know. But I loved in the commentary they talk about how when they did the 4K or when they did the, you know, the remastering, the restoration, not 4K as yet. But they were able to like zero in on like the tattoo on the guy's ass, and they saw it was like some kind of like Detroit football team or something. So that sort of got them thinking, oh, maybe it was filmed somewhere in the Detroit area. But just the perseverance of these people that are so like determined to find out about these movies, and you know, there's a real mystery to them. Like, you know, why do we want to know exactly where it was filmed? But you know, it's of no importance. But to us, it is. You know, it's like I'd really love to know
some
that.
Real myth making behind it.
I'd love to know who was behind that movie. You know.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. And you've got more presentations coming up at the Cinemaniacs, don't you?
Yes, I've been doing Cinemaniacs presentations almost since the beginning, but I've only really been part of, I guess, on their committee as such, started this year, but always been involved with them. I think the first screening intro I did for them was The Warriors back at Acme. And since then I've done Bless the Beast and the Children was one of my favourites, Flash Gordon. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a great intro that I did for their Tobe Hooper Festival. And there was a couple of others as well. Blood-Sucking Freaks, that was a real popular one. I gave out little souvenir straws with like the old video, because when Blood-Sucking Freaks first came out on video in Australia in the 80s, of course, on the Palace explosive label. When you first got it, they gave you a little straw that had like a little tag on it saying "Blood Sucking Freaks Beginners Kit." So I don't know if you've seen Blood Sucking Freaks, but
No,
there's
I
a
haven't,
famous scene involving sucking out a girl's brain with a straw. So
I've probably seen the clip somewhere, but yeah.
So that was a fun screening. That went down well, and we had Joel Reed do an introduction, the director of the film, who's since passed away. And but yeah, this year I've got Roller Coaster coming up in June, which is one of my favourite 70s films that I'm really looking forward to. A 70s sort of Hitchcockian thriller that has George Segal and Timothy Bottoms. Basically about a nut who goes around America blowing up the amusement park rides, trying to extort money out of them, and George Segal's the insurance investigator who gets tangled up in trying to sort of stop this guy. So it's kind of like a mixture of the 70s disaster movie, which Hitchcockian sort of cat and mouse, and was originally released in the Sensurround format, which basically had a special sound system that boosted up the bass so that the whole sort of cinema would shake during the roller coaster scenes. So definitely an underrated 70s thriller. Should look fantastic on the big screen. I never saw it in Sensurround, unfortunately, at the time, but I did see it at the drive-in with my sister and her boyfriend. And one of those films that I think not really overly well known, so hopefully a few people will come along to it and enjoy it and experience it. And then later in the year, getting towards November, I'm doing TerrorVision, which is a sort of 80s low-budget horror sci-fi satire about an alien that gets, gets like, what do they call it? I guess abandoned or discharged from their home planet via radio beams and ends up inside a person's commercial satellite television disc. So it's like a really colourful, wild send-up, but basically it's got, references to basically every 80s sort of pop culture touchstone in it. There's MTV, there's aerobics, there's cable television, suburban swingers, and great cast. Got Mary Woronov and Diane Franklin, a few other people. So yeah, really looking forward to that. Again, another movie that's not totally well known, but hopefully people will come along and enjoy it and have a good time.
Yeah.
Great soundtrack as well, which just got re-released. I was in JB a couple of months ago and came across the soundtrack of TerrorVision might have been on purple or some sort of coloured vinyl. So snap that up. That's another thing I like to support, even though I've got the soundtracks already. You know?
Yeah.
It's just like you see these things, as you said, the movie sections at JB are shrinking, but you got to support them if you want them to stay around.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. I guess lastly, we'll ask the big question of: do you have a favourite film, or at least one that you would suggest as something maybe really strange or obscure? Or
Look, if you're looking at that, I'd say one of the films I presented at Cinemaniacs, Bless the Beasts and Children, is a definite favourite. That's a film that I first discovered. Well, firstly, it was made in 1971 by Stanley Kramer, and it's based on a book that came out a year earlier by Glendon Swarthout, and it's about a group of misfits kids at a summer camp in America, in Arizona. Basically, they're dubbed the bedwetters because they're like hopeless at everything, all the activities, and they get picked on and bullied by everyone else. And one night they decide to prove their worth to themselves as well as to everyone else by breaking out of camp and heading off on a trip to set free a herd of buffalo that are about to be slaughtered the next day by a group of hunters for sport. And it's kind of all about how they discover themselves and discover their worth, and just a terrific film, a coming of age film. And it was one of those movies that I'd never heard of but just stumbled upon one night when I was watching TV. And I think it struck me because I was around the same age as the kids in the movie, so around 13, 14. It was around about the same age that I first went on my family vacation to America, where we went to Arizona and the places where the story took place. So that sort of connected with me as well. And also, I guess I wasn't sort of like a bullied at school, but I definitely wasn't one of the jocks as well. So you kind of identified with some of the lead characters, and just a great little story as well. And the way it's directed, Stanley Kramer sort of throws in little flashback vignettes to sort of show what their home life was like, and how they sort of wound up the way they did. And it has come out on like on demand a few years ago, print on demand DVD. But again, one that definitely needs a good Blu-ray release. Got a great theme song as well by the Carpenters. So, if you haven't seen it, definitely worth a watch. A bit of a sad story as well, but probably a film that in the future, if I ever get the opportunity, maybe one I'd like to, even write a whole book about. I think it's maybe after I do my Kiss book, it's something that I've toyed with. Trouble is, the thing is too with a lot of these films these days from that era, you've got to get the people while there's still some around. The main actor unfortunately died in the 80s. He was an early victim of AIDS, and one of the other kids has since passed away. But I've been in touch with a couple of the other actors that play kids, which would be great to interview them while they're still around and still able to. The director's obviously passed away, but so that would definitely be one. When You're Coming Back, Red Ryder, which I talked about earlier, is another fantastic movie that's definitely there in my top 10. The rest of them would probably be movies that people have heard of. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was, that's one that I saw when I was about 19, 20, because it got banned out here for about the first 10 years. So it didn't get released here. The ban didn't get lifted until about, I think, late 83, early 84. So I remember seeing that at the cinema, and when the ban was lifted, and just that the whole sensation of watching it and just feeling that like terror, like I felt sick to my stomach while watching it, especially the meat hook scene and the extended chase scene at the end. Like I literally thought I was going to throw up, which would make you think I should hate the movie, but I was like, this movie's incredible. Like no movie's ever before or since made me feel that way, and just that scene where Leatherface grabs Terry McMinn, Pam, and sort of drags her back inside the house, and she's sort of squealing like a kitten that's being tortured. It was just so on such a gut level, just such an amazing film. So getting to present a screening of that at Cinemaniacs was great a few years ago, and look, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, another favourite. The Naked Prey is another one that most people may not know, but that's out on Criterion, Blu-ray and DVD. That's a movie that I think brings back memories of perhaps my mum having an indication that I was a bit of a film fan. So I remember being a small kid and I was like fast asleep, and my mum just woke me up out of a dead sleep one day at about maybe 11 o'clock at night and said, "Oh, there's this movie coming up that sounds like you might enjoy." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I got up and watched it, and that was The Naked Prey, and that's sort of set in Africa during the sort of the 1800s, and a group of white hunters go out on a hunt for elephant tusks, and they end up getting like killed by a tribe of a native tribe because they wouldn't give them any gifts for coming onto their land. But Cornell Wilde, who both starred and directed the film, his character sort of did show a bit of like I guess compassion, and wanted to give them some gifts but was like cut off. So to give him a chance, they sort of give him like a bit of a head start, and then the rest of the film is basically these natives hunting him down through Africa as he tries to make it back to the fort that he came from. And really amazing film, like really just desolate, adventure. So definitely another one worth tracking down if people out there hadn't seen it. The Naked Prey does have a few scenes, like Blessed of the Beasts and the Children, has a few sort of stock footage of some buffalo getting shot, and Naked Prey has some footage of elephants being shot, which hard to watch, but again, it's
it's the way the film is.
It helps the point get made as well, and
Excellent.
I guess being stock footage makes it a little bit more bearable because that.
The filmmakers didn't go out of their way to be like, we've got to kill these animals for this shot, it'll be great. It's like, nah.
So there's another film, Tintorera, the Jaws ripoff from South America, Mexico, Rene Cardona. And when that came out on Blu-ray, I was excited, but then watching it, because it's so cleaned up, you can sort of see where they've like got wires hooked in the shark's mouth to sort of like drag him in a certain direction and that. And so, sometimes Blu-ray can...
reveal too much,
and things like the Thunderbirds as well. I don't know if you've ever seen the Thunderbirds TV show, but I don't have it on Blu-ray, but DVDs, like the wires are so like transparent. Sometimes I think, they were better on VHS because the wires were more hidden.
It's like me when I watch Alien. I'm like, it was scarier on DVD because it was so dark, but now
Yeah.
watching it in 4K, I'm like, it looks beautiful, but I'm not scared of it anymore because I can see the shadows. I know the alien's not there, so... I mean, I probably have watched that film like 10 or 15 times, so it probably doesn't help that I know when the alien shows
Well,
up.
that would be another one in my top 10 as well.
Yeah.
You know, while everyone else as a kid was into Star Wars, you know, Alien was kind of my Star Wars. You know, I did see Star Wars as a kid and liked it, you know, but Alien was the one I went really mad over. You know, it was just a perfect mix of space and horror, you know, science fiction and horror, and you know that H.R. Geiger design. The only drama was at the time, because Alien was released in sort of May, June in America, which is their big summer holidays. But at the time here, you know, it didn't get released in Australia until like November, December, in time for our school holidays. So it was, you know, I'd be reading about it in Starlog and Fangoria and all of these magazines and try not to spoil it, you know, because all the books were coming out. So I had the comic book adaptation before the movie even got released out here, and try not to read them to spoil myself. But what a great movie! I just remember that whole first scene where Brett is looking for the alien after the cat gets out. You know, that was just terrifying. You know, the suspense, and I'm looking forward to the new one actually, Alien Romulus.
No, I'm looking forward to it as well.
A bit of promise, the trailer looks good. But...
I've never so far have not disliked any of the Alien films. So
I mean, look, there's some that I like better than others, you know, but I'm always willing to give an Alien movie a go. You know, I wasn't a huge fan of the Alien versus Predators, but
I liked the first one as a cheesy, schlocky thing, but it definitely needed more of the Alien Predators. But the second one I can't watch. I'm like, I've seen it as a kid, and I'm like, that shit was disgusting as a kid, and also it's really dark. So I'm like you can't see shit. I'm like, I don't need to see that movie.
But now all the actual Alien movies, they've all had their own sort of tone as well, which I appreciate. You know, they've all brought their own tone to it.
Yeah. Cool. I think that kind of wraps it up. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, John.
No worries. Anytime.
Yes. Is there any links or anything I could put down in the description to get people to find your work, or just...
Yeah, I've got my website, my blog website, Sin Street Sleaze, or if you just type John Harrison Blogspot, but I can send you a link to that as well, and my Facebook page is public, so
Yeah, well, there'll be links down below in the description if you want to look for anything, so yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, excellent.
Beautiful. Cool. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, no worries.
Appreciate it.
Hey, hope you guys enjoyed that. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more. If you want to see more stuff with John, you can always take a look down in the description. There should be links to his websites and other ways to find his works. You can also check out other interviews that I've done previously, including a recent one with Matthew Holmes, who is a Australian film director, or Lee Gambin, another film historian, or Caitlin Collar, another Australian film director. What is going on with these Australians in my videos? Anyway, playlists will be on the screen later, as well as down in the description down below, so go ahead and check those out if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. See you next time. Adios.